Thank you for joining me today. Today we will be discussing the configuration of the Sales Order Manager. In this webinar, I'll explain briefly what the Order Manager is and how it's used. I'll show you how to configure bars and buttons within the Order Manager. And finally, we'll go over how to use quick filters and sorting to find the order information that you need. So what is the Order Manager? The Order Manager is a tool that allows you to perform actions on a group of orders and display a list of orders that meet a certain criteria. Today we'll focus more on the configuration and setup of the Order Manager. We won't spend a lot of time regarding the performing of actions on those orders. With the Order Manager, you're able to set up bars and buttons, which show you a list of orders that have already been filtered. This will give you the ability to quickly and repeatedly find and work with the orders that meet a certain criteria. And the Order Manager also allows you to apply quick filters to some of the pre-set up buttons so that you can be flexible with your order queries and actions. I'm going to show you how to set up custom bars in the Order Manager. A bar is a collection of buttons. Keep in mind, these bars are visible to all users. That being said, we'll discuss some possible suggestions for creating and using those bars. Typically, a bar will show buttons that are of a similar nature. For example, we may have a bar that has buttons corresponding to a particular salesperson. Regarding custom buttons, the buttons in a bar are constructed using a query builder, which will display orders that meet a specific criteria. For example, a button may show all the back-ordered orders for a particular salesperson. So what are some typical uses of the Order Manager? Rescheduling orders would be one. You can focus on orders that have back orders and need to be rescheduled. You can reschedule these orders in batch. Rescheduling is the act of allocating available inventory to the orders that need it. You can also view all your web stores by each individual web store or as a whole, meaning I want to see all my web orders. Same with EDI orders. You can view each EDI trading partner's orders by the particular trading partner, or you can just look at all your EDI orders. You can create bars and buttons for a specific customer's orders so that you have better visibility of the status of their orders. So this may be a high volume customer, for example, or a high value customer. And then you can look at bars by department managers. For example, you could separate orders by who might be interested in them. The warehouse manager may want to see orders that are in a different workflow statuses, like ready to pick, pick in progress, and shipped, whereas the sales manager may want to see all open quotes or all open orders. Okay, with that being said, let's take a look. So to open up the Order Manager, you have an icon on your toolbar right here, or you can also go to the Sales menu and choose Order Manager. Both will get you to the same window, so I'm going to click on the Order Manager icon to open it up. So when the Order Manager opens, it'll open in the last bar that you looked at, and it will show you the buttons for that bar. So, for example, right now, I am on the Workflow Statuses bar. And when I'm on that bar, I have a different button representing each workflow status. So let's take a look at this menu again, dive into these bars. Below this gray line, I have 3 bars: sales orders, service orders, and workflow statuses. You may only have 2 depending on which modules you have. These are the default bars that come with Acctivate. These are pre-configured to show you certain buttons that display orders that meet a certain criteria. Everything above this gray bar, all of these are bars that are custom bars that I've created, each showing buttons that meet a certain criteria. So when I'm on the ABC orders bar, I see all the orders for my customer ABC. Okay, let's take a look at the configuration, and I'll show you how those were set up. So as I mentioned, those bottom 3 are the standard bars that come with Acctivate. They are listed at the top here and they're grayed out. You can view them, the buttons and the bars, but you can't edit these. These offer a certain level of consistency, so you can actually copy these, and if there's one that shows you a certain set of criteria, you could copy that and then modify it further, but we won't let you actually edit these. So let's start from scratch. That'll be the best way to get a better understanding of this, and we'll go through it step by step, and then we'll look at some of these custom ones that have already been created. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new bar. Like I said earlier with the slides, a bar typically shows buttons that have a similar nature to them. So what I want to do is I want to create a bar for all of my salesperson Floyd's orders. So down here in the bottom left, I'm going to click Add, and my option is to add a bar. So I need to give it a description. I'm going to call it Floyd's bar. As I also mentioned earlier, everyone can see these bars, so use some certain level of planning when you set these up so that, again, Floyd may want to see all his orders. He'll create his own bar, and maybe someone else would have a separate bar for them. So now that I've given the bar a name, I'll click OK. And you'll see over here on the left, it's added a new button, and it's just got the name New Button. I can edit that though. So I want to create a new button, and I'm going to create a button that shows me specific orders. In this case, I'm going to show all of Floyd's orders where the subtotal is over $2,000. For Floyd, let's say that that is a significant amount, and he usually has a fair amount of those orders, so he wants to have better visibility of those. So I'm going to call it over 2K. Over here in the amount field, I have some options. Before I explain that, let's look at this preview. So right now it's showing the name of the bar, and then the number in the bottom right corner, 56. This is the number of orders that meet the current criteria right here, which we'll go over in a little bit. So that's the number of orders. Now, I can also, on that button, display an amount. So for example, if I do ordered, you'll see down here I have 319,000. That's the total ordered amount for all of the orders meeting this criteria. Now I have some other options. Scheduled would be the quantity scheduled to be picked and shipped and invoiced. Back ordered would obviously show the value of the back ordered quantity. And then authorized. Authorized is if you are authorizing credit cards within Acctivate. When you create the invoice, it can capture the funds, so you can have an authorization on the card, and then invoicing it will capture the funds. Setting the amount to be authorized would show you the amount that has been pre-authorized for these orders. So in this case, I just want to look at the total ordered amount, so I'm going to flip that to be ordered. Now when I created my new button, it automatically filled in with these two criteria. We can edit these, but these are usually a good start. So type is order, as opposed to, when I click this drop down, a quote, a service order, or a credit memo. So in this case, I'm only interested in looking at orders. And the order status is any of scheduled or back ordered. So now I need to add to these criteria to filter in on Floyd's orders and the value of the order. So to do that, I'm going to go back up to this matches all. This matches all is saying that the orders that are going to be displayed need to match all these criteria, and I can add another level here. And when I do that, it adds order number, but I'm going to change that. I'm going to scroll down to be salesperson's name. And then I have is, and I can enter a value, and when I click in here, I can choose a value. We're going to say is Floyd Harris. I can actually click on is, and this opens up a menu of operators here. So is obviously would show me all the orders where Floyd Harris is a salesperson. Is not would be the opposite of that, all the orders where Floyd is not the salesperson. Some of these won't apply on these text fields. Is greater than, for example. Is between, we probably wouldn't use. Contains, we could use. But typically for these, it's going to be is or is any of. So maybe I want to say it's Floyd Harris, and now I have another little plus sign here. And I can add a second salesperson if I wanted to, which I'm not interested in that right now. So I'm going to say it is, the salesperson is Floyd. And then again, we're focusing on orders over $2,000. So I'm going to click my drop down here, and I'm going to come down to the subtotal field. And again, I have another list of operators to choose from, slightly different. So in this case, I don't want to use is, because if I use is 2000, it's going to show me only orders where the subtotal is 2000, and I actually want to see anything over that. I could do is greater than, but then that would actually show me orders of 2001 and above. So I actually want to do is greater than or equal to $2,000. I could very well also do is between, and here I have a range. It's between 2000 and whatever number that is that I would set. But again, I'm going to just keep it as it's greater than or equal to 2000. So now I have this button here. This is just a preview. When I click OK, it'll be refreshed. But I'm going to have 7 orders with a total value of 319,000. So I can construct it that way. I will also have the ability to copy an existing button. While I'm at it, let's say I want to add another button that shows all of Floyd Harris's orders, but I don't want to hone in on specifically the ones over 2,000. I just want to see all his open orders. So to do that, I can go to one of our existing bars or buttons. It could be a custom one or one of our standard ones. So I'm going to go to the sales orders bar. I'm going to click the open orders button. And like I said, I can't edit this one, but I can copy it. And when I click copy, that opens up this window, and it's going to ask me where I want to copy it. So I can copy it into Floyd's bar, and it's going to use the original name. So it says open. I don't have to edit it, but you could say Floyd's open. And I'll click OK. So now it did copy it into Floyd's bar, but I'm copying that existing criteria. I do need to add to this. So under this section, I will click the plus sign. And again, I will add salesperson is Floyd. Now, one thing to consider when setting up buttons is while these let you hone in on a group of orders that meet a certain criteria, there could be some overlap here. So for example, I'm seeing order A1494T under the over 2000, but I'm also showing it under the Floyd's open because this is meant to show him all his open orders. You may consider when setting up buttons, it may be justified in creating a button that is essentially the opposite of another button so that we don't have that overlap. There's no harm in having the overlap. It's just good to understand what you're looking at. So in this case, I could say, if I wanted to, the subtotal, since we did is greater than or equal to, we'll just say is less than 2,000 here. So that gives me 2. Before it was showing 9, including the 7 over 2,000. And so I could say Floyd's under 2K. So while setting up one button may make sense, I want to see everything over 2,000. It may just be worthwhile to set up the opposite so that you have both ends of the spectrum there, everything over 2,000 and everything under 2,000. Okay. So again, those standard bars are very useful in terms of copying existing buttons. Let's go ahead and create one more here. I'm going to create a button, and we'll just call this Floyd's orders. I really just want to show off some of the other fields here. So I'm going to click this plus sign. So as you can see, we have several different fields at the order level that you're able to filter in on. It doesn't show detailed level information, with the exception that you can see the scheduled count, for example, which it's summing it up for the entire order, but this would be the quantity on the order that is scheduled. So if I just said I want to show any order where the scheduled count is greater than 0, that's going to show me everything where there's at least something to pick. So the icons over here, if you're not familiar with these, green means that the entire order's scheduled. There's no back orders. Yellow means it's partially back ordered. There's some back ordered, but there's also some to pick. And then the red octagon would be it's completely back ordered. So by saying that there's at least something to pick on here, it's going to show under this button. Likewise, you can say the scheduled icon is scheduled, or so you can say, this is a little bit different because it's more specific. You can say I want to see where it's fully scheduled versus partially back ordered or completely back ordered. Okay. Now I can say I have some other fields which we'll look at in a second. Origin ID, which would be the source. Is it a web order, an EDI order, a manually entered order? We can also filter in on some of these payment warning icons, for example. If the payment is not the full amount to match the scheduled amount, we can hone in on that. And let's look at the requested ship date. So the reason I want to show this is the list of operators is a little bit different, a little bit lengthier. And if you're familiar with reports in Acctivate, some of these may look familiar. So you can set a specific range, is on or after a date. But you can also choose one of these predefined date parameters. So I can say it's this week. The requested ship date is this week. That would give you the ability to pull up all the orders that are planning on or that have a requested ship date of this week. Okay. So I don't necessarily want to save this button. I just wanted to show how some of those operators are different. So I can delete this button. So I would click on whatever button I want to delete, and I'm going to click the delete button. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the configuration of these other custom bars that already exist in the system. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on ABC orders. I'm going to expand this. And this is very similar to our sales order bar here. We have open, back ordered, scheduled. There's some workflow status buttons. But what you'll notice is the key component here is that the customer ID is, and I'm setting it to a particular customer. So I have buttons that focus in on the orders that I want to see. The workflow status is ready to pick. But I'm focusing in where the customer is ABC. So again, this is a valuable suggestion if you have a customer that you work with closely. They're calling frequently to check on the status of their orders, or they're just important to you and you want to have visibility of where all their orders are. Creating a bar specifically for their orders may make sense. Okay. Another useful button is also using the updated date is today. So again, we get back to these date operators where we can set it to a specific date. So if you wanted to see all the ABC orders that were updated as of today. Now when we go into the EDI orders, these are set up very similar, but slightly different. So my open EDI orders, I'm focused in where the order status is open. It's a booked, scheduled, or back-ordered order status. And then here's that origin type. So the origin type, again, tells us where the order came from. A manually entered order, which would be one where you log in Acctivate, you go into the sales order, click New, that is going to fall under the origin type of manual. Orders created through EDI, the EDI import, will use the origin type of EDI, and orders created through a web store will have the origin type of web. So in this case, we are going to focus in on the EDI orders, and this is going to show me all my EDI orders, and here's my customers. But I also would like to split them up by the trading partner. So again, I can just take it a step further where I have the same button, the first three criteria being the same. Origin type is EDI. But for customer type, I am going to specify which customer this is for. In this case, Target.com, Walmart, Macy's, etc. We also have the same change today. The next two bars, Sales Manager and Warehouse Manager, show orders that might be relevant to different employees within the company. So when the Sales Manager opens up their bar, they want to see all open orders, all open quotes, booked orders, back-ordered orders, scheduled, on credit hold, ready to acknowledge. These are ones which haven't had a order confirmation sent out yet. In warehouse, so these are the workflow status of packaging, pick in progress, pick on hold, picked, ready to pick and shipped. So these are ones that are beyond, partially invoiced, for example. So these are ones that the warehouse is working with. Credits and change today. So the sales manager may want to configure these buttons to show orders based on those criteria, whereas the warehouse manager, if we go look at their buttons, these are more focused on the individual steps of the warehouse. So ready to pick would be orders that the warehouse can go out and print pick tickets for once those are printed from the order manager. or from the sales order, the workflow status gets updated to pick in progress. And so those would show up in here. They can move them into picked, picked on hold, packaging shipped, not ready to pick. So the warehouse is more interested in where it's at in the step, whereas the sales manager might be more interested in seeing open orders, quotes, credit memos, and things of that nature. We will come back to these and kind of add to some of those a little bit and show you some different examples there. So when we get into the web orders bar, these are configured the same way as the EDI manager. Again, with the origin type being slightly different this time. The origin type is web. Again, if you log into your web store and then you come into Acctivate and manually type it in, that is recorded in the Acctivate database as a manual order. The origin type is only web if you're using our web store module to import in the orders. Now, what I can do here is I can, in this case, I'm looking at all my web orders, but I could hone in on a particular web store. So I'm going to copy this open button. And when I click copy and I'm in the web orders bar, it'll offer to copy it into that same bar with the new description. It'll keep the original description, but it'll put a parentheses 01 on there just to make it a unique name. I can't have two buttons with the same name. If I were to move it to a different bar, it would, would change. But we're going to go into web orders, and the new description will be Magento orders. And here I'm going to add another criteria here. And we have the origin type is set to web. We have this other value, origin ID is, and here I would type in the template name. So when I set up the web store template and Acctivate, it has a name, and in this case it was called Magento. So when I put that in, that filters in on all those Magento orders. So now I've added this button that I plan on using. I want to see all my open web orders because I have multiple web stores, but I do want to have one button specifically for the Magento orders, which I've just created. But when I added the button, it added it at the end of the list here. And I don't really like that. I want it to be one of the first ones closer to the left. So while I'm on this button, over here on the left, I click on the button. At the bottom, I can move it left or right. I'm at the end, so I can't go to the right, but I can move it to the left. And as we do that, you'll see over here it's also moving up. It is now going to be positioned as the second button over. First I'll see the open orders and then the Magento orders. So let's just take a look at that real quick. So when I go to the web store, or I'm sorry, web orders bar, I have my open orders and my Magento orders. Now let's go back into the configuration. Now in terms of what information we're displaying in this grid down here, we can change that information as well. What you see in the order of the columns may vary depending on what the button is. So for example, when I'm on my open web orders, this will be showing all my web orders regardless of the origin ID. I do want to see that origin ID, so I'm going to have, in this case I only have Magento orders, but let's say I had a Magento website, a Shopify website, and a BigCommerce website. All of those three orders would show up in here, but I can move this origin ID over into this column so that when I open up this button, I'll see the scheduled icon, the order number, and then the origin ID. On the Magento button, I have that same origin ID, but really maybe that's not important to me because I have a button specifically called Magento. So what I can do is I can remove that. So at the bottom here I'm going to click Add Columns, and that gives me a new list of available fields to drop in here, but I can also remove these. So I'm going to click Origin ID, and I'm just going to drag it over here. And now you'll see it's gone from my grid here. But what I do want to add in there, let's say that I want to put in the hold status. So when I add in the hold status, I now see the credit hold status. So this particular order is over limit. Now payment warning icon, that is actually an icon, so that's why it's a narrower column. It would look like an exclamation point with a triangle in it, just a warning icon telling me that the payment amount doesn't match up with the scheduled amount. Now, people in the warehouse may be interested in seeing different things. So let's say the ready to pick. I can hide this column chooser down at the bottom. And what I want to do is I want to, well, I thought I had it in here, but I guess not. So let me add it in. I want to add the ship via in here. So I'm going to use my column chooser. I'm going to add the ship via. So again, we can rearrange this. So creating the button is going to return the orders, but there's also the additional step of configuring how we see the information for the orders that are returned. Okay, so now I have this information, and let's just close this and take a look at what we've done so far. So again, when I'm on the web orders, we do see open has order number, Magento. Magento, I do not have that Magento column anymore because that was just a waste of space since my button's called Magento and I have my hold status. Go to Warehouse Manager. And we have my information here. So let's go into the Configuration Manager and let's talk about some more advanced setup and how we may use these. I mentioned I'm not going to go into great detail on the actions that can be performed within the Order Manager. We do have some information on our help site, which I would recommend checking out. This is more about the configuration and setup, but Acctivate has some options regarding workflow statuses and how they are updated. And the workflow statuses are very powerful when used with the Order Manager. I'm going to briefly just jump into our Configuration Manager to illustrate my point here. What I want to show you is there are some defaults for orders. So when I create a new order, it's going to go into this ready to pick status right here. And then I have this workflow status section over here. So let me talk from the bottom up. When I print a pick ticket, the workflow status will automatically change into pick in progress. If I partially invoice an order, the workflow status goes into partially invoiced, which is what I'll be talking about, showing you in a second. And when the order is fully invoiced, it's completed, the workflow status also is set to completed. And then this option here, rescheduled, this is blank right now. You can optionally choose it to do ready to pick, which would mean when you want to allocate inventory, it'll revert the workflow status back to ready to pick. So a practical scenario would be you create an order, it's ready to pick, but it has some back-ordered items on it. You pick and ship and invoice what you can. The order now is partially invoiced. You receive an inventory. Using the Order Manager, you reallocate that inventory. If this is set to ready to pick, that order goes back to the beginning of the line. It has a workflow status of ready to pick. If you do not have this set, Acctivate, when you reschedule the order, the inventory is allocated to that order, but the workflow status remains in the workflow status that it was currently. So again, same scenario, it's ready to pick, partially pick, ship, and invoice. The workflow status goes into partially invoice. You receive in the remaining inventory from your vendor and you reschedule that order to allocate the inventory to it. It won't go back into a ready to pick status, it'll stay in this partially invoiced status. There is a valid reason for doing it this way, and I will show you in the Order Manager why you may not want to update that workflow status. So when we go back in here, let's go into the Warehouse Manager section. And so right now, under my ready to pick, it's showing me all the orders where it's an order, it's an open order, and it's ready to pick. Well, I'm going to break this down and I'm going to make a change here. What I want to do is I want to show me all the orders that have the workflow status of ready to pick, and there's at least something to pick. It's green or yellow. But anything that's been partially shipped, that means there's some back orders on it. I don't want to partially ship it again. I only want to show those orders in this ready to pick button if they've been partially invoiced and now I have the full remaining amount of the order. So I would say this is probably a little bit more of an advanced button, but I'll show you what we want to do. So this matches all. When I add these different criteria, like order number is, Acctivate will only return the orders that match all of the criteria listed out. So what I want to do in a way is create an or statement. I want it to show all the orders that meet this criteria or this criteria. So what I need to do is start up here. Instead of matches all, I'm going to say matches any. And then what I want to do is I want to add another level below that. So I'm going to add a new group below that that says matches all. And I'm going to try and do this fairly quickly. So I'm going to say, the type is order as opposed to the quote or credit memo. I'm going to show orders where the order status is any of, I'm going to say scheduled or back ordered. And then I'm going to say the workflow status is ready to pick. And then I'm going to use that scheduled icon. And I'm going to say is any of. I want to see any orders that are ready to pick that have something to pick. So they're green or yellow. So that's my first statement. Any new order essentially that's ready to pick where there's at least some quantity to pick. Now I want to scroll back up here and I'm going to add another group. So I'm going to click on matches any. I'm going to click add group again. Scroll down and now I have this other group that says matches all. And I want the first few criteria to be the same. So order type is, oh no, sorry, not origin type, order type, or type is order. Order status, oh, sorry. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to say the workflow status is partially invoiced and the scheduled icon is green. So the way you would read this is it's going to match any of these and it's going to go down to this next level. Basically all of that group or all of that group. So it's not looking at both, it's looking, well, it is looking at both, but each group has its own independent criteria. So anything that's ready to pick, which I would think of as anything that is new and there's something to pick, or anything that we partially invoiced and now we only want to ship it if it's the second half of it can ship in full. We don't want to keep partially shipping. Now my recommendation here, and this would be a strong recommendation, is it's easy to make these very detailed buttons and end up excluding and losing visibility of orders. What I mean by that is, and I mentioned this earlier, is now I may want to create a button that shows me the partially invoiced that are not scheduled. Right, so that way we can see those. So if I were to go just do a button real quick, I would say, partially invoiced, back ordered. Because this button would only look at the ones that are scheduled in full. So, and I'll just do this real quick. We'll say workflow status is partially invoiced, and then scheduled icon is any of, and here we'll do the opposite of that second half of that statement. So when I go in here, so my ready to pick is going to show me, so what you can see here is I have from here down to here, these are all ready to pick and they're green and yellow. This one is partially invoiced and it can be shipped in full. Now when I go over to here, these are also partially invoiced, but these have some level of back order. In this case, these are completely back ordered. So you don't want to lose visibility of those. If I had not created this button, it may be easy to overlook those. I would suggest having a button so that you can see and kind of see why, why are these still open? This one, in this case, is back from February. So think about that when you're setting up custom buttons, maybe making the opposite so you're not missing anything. Okay, so once we've created these buttons, we do have, let's go back to this ready to pick. Again, the idea with these buttons is that it's going to quickly return a list of orders that meet my criteria, and it's going to do it repeatedly. I can close this order manager, I can come in tomorrow, and I will be seeing a predefined group of orders. Now, there may be instances where I want to work with the record set I have here, but I want to quickly drill down a little bit further, apply some additional filters, but I don't want to save those and create a whole new button because it's not something I'll use on a daily basis. So for example, in the order manager here, I can sort. So if I wanted to just quickly get all my ABC customer orders, I can sort by this customer ID column, and then I click on the first one, I can hold shift on my keyboard, click down on the last one. For the selection, I can click check selected, or I could have right clicked on it and done check selected. And we're in the ready to pick button, so I can go to action and I can print my pick ticket. And again, that'll move these over to workflow, it'll move them into the workflow status of pick in progress, which would then show up under this button. But let's say I have a much lengthier list of orders, and I can't necessarily sort by the column, because that's just not practical for whatever I want to do. So I can use this quick filter icon here. So when I click on that, it's going to open up this quick filter window, and down here at the bottom it's going to show me what I'm currently viewing, the button I'm clicked on. So it's telling me what criteria I have in place, and this is what we set up in that configuration manager. So type is order, order status is in scheduled back order, etc. I can add on to the existing criteria at the bottom up here. So when I click this, and I can say my customer ID is, and I can type in my customer, I can use this lookup if I want, so I'll select ABC. And I'm going to click apply, but before I do that, it's going to apply this selection criteria to the rest of this. So I'm still focusing only on those ready to pick ones. I'll click apply, and as you can see, it filters it down. Now, I said it was a quick filter. The idea is it will stay filtered on that until either I close the order manager or I click this gray X next to the filter button. As you can see, it says clear filter. So if I were to click that, my filter is removed, and as you can see, the button is now not active. Let me add it back in. So I've filtered it down, and I'm going to click OK here. And if I close my order manager, that will remove it. So I'm going to close the order manager. I'm going to go back into my order manager. And now I'm still on the ready to pick button. Again, it'll open it up in the last bar I was in. All of my customers are showing. It's not filtered in on the ABC customer. So if it is something that you find yourself repetitively doing, you're always looking at just ABC's customers, you're looking at just ABC's orders, I would suggest creating a bar or a button just to see those, but it can allow you to quickly filter in. Another practical scenario would be using the filter to focus in on the requested ship date, for example. Requested ship date is, let's just say I have one, so I'll say it's this week. So maybe when I'm doing my picking, I just want to focus first on everything that is this week. I can check those off, print my pick ticket. Now once you've configured your buttons in your bar and you have the columns that you want, you can send this grid to Excel. So whether you're performing actions, so in this case the warehouse manager is likely to come in here and select, again, maybe we want to select all the green ones first. We want to pick these in full. I'm going to check selected. I can print pick tickets for those. The order manager is more useful as a tool for managing the orders. but maybe my sales manager wants to pull this information out. I want to get all my quotes. I can right click in here and I can send to Excel, and I can put it into an Excel file and then send that to someone else, either all the salespersons or management, whomever, to look at what open quotes we have. So from that standpoint, it's very valuable as a query tool. Let's take a look at some questions here. Let's see, there's a good question here. When using quick filters, is this available to all users as well? Or I'm sorry, is this viewable to all users as well? No. So the buttons, again, everyone will have access to the bars and the buttons. And so if I'm in the sales manager bar and I'm on the open orders and somebody else is in there, we will be seeing the same list of orders. If I do a quick filter, they will not see that. The quick filter will only be for my user and what I'm looking at. So I may focus this on only ABC orders, and it may filter it down to 5. Someone else on a different workstation that pulls up this bar and button would see the full list. So the quick filter is just quickly for your user only. And one thing I think I did illustrate here is that you can, in these columns, drag and drop these around. So for example, if I'm in the sales manager again, maybe the workflow status is important to me, I can move that over and that'll save it there. One thing I will also point out, if you end up creating a bar that has quite a few buttons, so maybe instead of ABC orders, you have a bar called high value customers, and when you click on that, you have a button for your top 50 customers. That might be a little excessive, but if you have a lot, I'm going to go to the sales order, and not all the buttons can fit on the screen, there's a little arrow on the left and right here that'll help you navigate. So if you can't see them all, you just click it and it'll slide over to see the rest of the buttons. Okay, so there's a question here. Are custom fields available to display in the grid? Yes. So let's go into the configuration manager. So two things. And I suppose it doesn't matter which one I'm on here. It can be used as a criteria to filter on. So I believe we have one in here. Yes, so test is a custom field, and the way it'll show up in this list is the name of the custom field, and then in brackets next to it, it'll say custom. So test was just a test custom field created, and then I can enter in some value. And then in terms of adding the columns down here, so same thing, it'll be the name of the custom field, and then in brackets custom, and that can be displayed here. So in this case, it appears it's a checkbox. So it can be filtered on and it can display in the grid. So there's a question here, is there a way to show the product ID that is associated with the orders? No. Again, this is summary order header level information. So the only thing related to products is going to be, it's not going to give you the individual products, but it's just going to give you the scheduled icon. So it could be 2 lines where, in this case, this one's yellow, one is scheduled, one's on back order, or it could be 50 lines and 49 of them are scheduled and one's on back order. This is just header level information. For detail, you'd either need to drill down into the order, which you can do by double clicking on the order, or use a different report. We have some reports that do show the details of the order. Double clicking on it's going to open up the order and you'll have the information. So it's more about the order status, requested ship date, workflow statuses, customers, things like that. Can we take a look at EDI orders? Can you sort by multiple EDI provider sources? If I understand the question, if the question is, can we see our SPS commerce orders versus our true commerce orders or something like that? No, but typically, I've never seen where, one, I would say that's kind of an uncommon scenario to have different EDI provider sources, but there's probably a good reason for that. And if you do have them separate, I would imagine that you don't have any overlap with the trading partners, meaning Walmart's not going to be, you're not going to get Walmart orders through SPS Commerce and True Commerce. So you could create a bar called SPS Commerce orders and then have buttons for the trading partners that come through that provider. And then you could have a True Commerce bar that has the trading partners that come through the True Commerce SPS provider. Now, this is another good question. Is there a way to do relative date filtering? Example would be open quotes older than 6 months. Unfortunately, no. I would suggest using the quick filter in that case. So what you may have noticed was right now I'm just looking at the open quotes. Let's say I want to say the order date is, and I can say is between a date range, not between a date range, so that would be defining specific dates. Is next week's, tomorrow, today, yesterday, whatever. It doesn't give a rolling period here. I can't say is in the next in days, in the next 20 days. So I would probably suggest using a quick filter though, where you know what 6 months is. So for example, today is November 28th. So I could say is on or before, and then I would just need to plug in, and I'm not sure that we have any. There probably is. Yeah, so there are some here. So these are the ones that are from May and earlier. So I would use a quick filter to be flexible in that manner. But there's not a way to set up a predefined the last 6 months. It would need to either be a specific date range or in the last month. One other comment I'll make, we'll just give a few more minutes for any other questions to come in. When using the filters, my options for selecting the values vary based on the type of field I'm filtering on. So for example, when I'm in type, I have a drop down here of one of these. When the customer ID, when I click on that, I can open up the customer ID lookup, or I could just type in the customer name. If I were to do, I think we saw this with the origin ID, it's just a text field. And so in some cases, you will need to type in the actual value. Is there a view that shows orders shipped in a month with order invoice total and sales tax total? So if we were to go look at, say, let's go look at the workflow statuses, and I don't have any in here. We'll look at packaging, but let's say I have a workflow status of shipped. We do have the total of the order. I don't believe we display the tax information in here. And then one other question here, and then we'll wrap it up, is rescheduling orders. I would strongly suggest taking a look at some of our previous webinars. We have another webinar on using the order manager, and that goes more into all the actions. But the rescheduling of orders, that is the act of allocating the available inventory to the orders. So let me go into warehouse managers. Sorry, I saw that filter. That's actually something I should have pointed out. When you're on that quick filter, that filter is for all the buttons. So if I say I want to filter on ABC orders and I click to a different button, that filter is still in place for the other buttons. So let's say that I have received in inventory. I want to allocate it to the orders that need it. And we can set up a button for that, and I will do that real briefly. I would typically suggest setting it up this way. I'm going to do it under the warehouse manager, and I'm going to add a button here, and I'm going to call it orders to reschedule. So when we reschedule orders, we want to only focus on certain orders. We don't want to do it to all orders with back orders. That can be disruptive to the system. And when I say the system, I mean to the process outside of the software. So for example, I want to say the workflow status is, and I'll do is any of ready to pick and partially invoiced. And then I'm going to add scheduled icon. Is I can say is any of, or and include the backordered ones, or I can just say is not scheduled. That would give me the same effect. So what do I mean by it could be disrupted to reschedule all the orders? When you reschedule an order, so these all have some level of backorder. The red, again, completely backordered. Yellow is partially backordered. If I receive in, let's just say that all of these orders need the product B10 on it. And if I receive in a PO from my vendor and it has 100 B10 on there and I receive them in, Acctivate doesn't automatically allocate that inventory because maybe it's not enough to fulfill all these orders, so it doesn't know how you want to allocate that inventory. So we'll need to perform an action to allocate that inventory. But we only want to do it to orders that are at the beginning of the line. That would be the ready to pick, meaning they haven't been touched, or the ones where they're at the end of the line. They've been partially shipped and invoiced. What we don't want to do is reschedule an order that's currently being picked by the warehouse, because let's say the customer ordered 10, 6 are scheduled for on back order, and you print out a pick ticket and you give it to somebody in the warehouse, and the pick ticket tells them to go pick 6. They start picking it, and you reschedule that order that is currently listed as pick in progress. Activate's going to change it to be 10 scheduled and 0 on back order, but that wouldn't update the piece of paper in their hand, so they may continue to pick the 6 and ship that, and then we may end up accidentally invoicing them for 10. So that is how it can be disruptive to the process outside of the software. We don't want to change anything that's currently being worked on. So we'll focus on the ready to pick orders that haven't had a pick ticket printed, or the ones where we shipped what we could and they're partially invoiced because they had back orders on it. And again, this button's only going to show me the ones where there are some level of back order. So now that I have that, I'm under orders to schedule, and I don't know honestly that I have an example set up where I have 12 on here that meet this criteria. I don't know that I have any inventory that hasn't been allocated to these, but just real briefly, when you schedule using the order manager, it starts at the top of the list and works its way down. So I'm going to sort by order date, and I'm going to start with the oldest, newest. So when I go to action schedule, do I want to schedule these 12 orders? Yes. Activate is going to start at the top of this list, working its way down. So Activate is going to check, and that did make some changes here, but that's going to check at the first one and see if there's any available inventory. And then it's going to go to the next one. And it's going to go all the way through allocating what it can until it runs out. Now you'll notice it was 12 a second ago, so one of them is no longer in here. It has now moved into a green icon and is out of this view. And I believe there were a few more red, so I think some of these did go into yellow. So that's probably, and again, I wasn't planning on going into this, but I would say that is probably one of the best uses of the order manager is whenever you're receiving a PO, there's a change in available inventory, coming into the order manager, finding the orders that need it, sorting. Again, you could say, well, maybe Walmart's my most important, so I'll do them first and then do the other ones. But regardless, sorting it and then allocating the inventory to those orders that need it. Okay, I think we've about hit our time here, so this is a good stopping point. So as I mentioned, we do have another webinar on the order manager usage. This was more about the configuration. I would recommend checking that out. You can go to our help site, help.acctivate.com, to find articles regarding order manager, workflow statuses, and other information, as well as those webinars. Thank you for joining us today.